Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining me today. This will be the first video in a series of 5 videos that will take a look at exploration that took place by a variety of countries and places around the world. And by exploration, the emphasis is going to be exploration at sea. So we're going to take a look at a number of different examples of people and places that began to kind of branch out from their home bases by sea to try to locate other places, find other places, try to better their country and their people somehow or another from traveling abroad, seeing what was out there. And so in this first video, we're going to focus on China and a short period of time in Chinese history when China was involved in explorations at sea. All right, so the time period that we're talking about took place during the time of the Ming Dynasty. You can see up on the screen, Ming Dynasty was in place in China between the years 1368 and 1644. And the time period that we'll focus on for the Ming voyages of exploration will be in the early years of the 1400s. Now, China at this point in time had become a rather dominant place in Asia. They had many of their neighbors paying tribute to them, or basically acknowledging with gifts the superiority and the dominance of China in exchange for that acknowledgement and maybe some degree of protection. So China's position where they were in the world was solid and arguably pretty good. Now, one thing to mention about China before we talk about these voyages of exploration is if you look at the history of this region before and then really after the time of exploration, China historically has been an isolated country. Much more of their history is one of isolation. And a lot of that has to do with basically having a perception that they were content, that they had the things that they needed, the things that they wanted, that they didn't need to look outside for more stuff. And another thing that tended to come with that was wanting to be able to control the relationships that they had with other people. So if there were others that came into contact with them, whatever that looked like, they definitely wanted to have the relationship or the interaction favor them, understandably so. So one thing that's kind of unique about these Chinese voyages of exploration is that it's a very small part in the time of China's history, but a very interesting part. So basically, the short stretch of time where China did engage in voyages at sea was under the leadership of the second emperor in the Ming period, a person by the name of Hongwu. He ended up coming to power, just as a time reference, in the year 1403. One of the things about him, in addition to trying to carry on the things that his father had started, which had helped put China at that point in time onto a prosperous path, is he had an interest in the outside world. And so these sea voyages that would happen under his rule were largely based on a basic interest. It wasn't necessarily that China was looking to find new places. It wasn't necessarily that China was looking to get rich or to necessarily have a whole lot of different influence than they already had, but really largely based on interest. And so what we see is that the beginning of what would amount to 7 voyages at sea. Now, a key figure for these Chinese voyages was a person by the name of Zheng He. He was a sea admiral. He was the person who would ultimately lead all 7 of these voyages. And part of what's unique and interesting about the Chinese voyages was their scale. Depending on the specific voyage that we're talking about, they certainly varied in how many people were involved or how many ships were involved. But when you look at them overall, the voyages consisted between anywhere from 40 to 300 ships, maybe as many as 27,000 people might be involved with an individual expedition. So you basically had what amounted to a city worth of people and a city's worth of supplies traveling on some of these voyages. Now, the picture on the screen is meant to show where they sailed to. The area that's shaded on the right-hand side is, let me see if I can blow this up. Actually, I don't know if I'll be able to. No, I guess not. The area that shaded that was the Ming region. And so you can see that when you follow the purple lines, that to a large degree, they focused on the Indian Ocean region, where India was at, and then on to the west to where we would see the Middle East, and then the eastern part of Africa. So they covered quite a bit of area, not land that was unknown to them, but not necessarily land that they had traveled to by sea. And a big part of what they were about with these voyages was to make contact with some of these people. One of the things they brought were a lot of gifts to be able to show their wealth. It wasn't just to be nice, but to basically be able to show, look how wealthy and powerful we are to have these gifts to give you. And one of the things that they were able to receive in return were tribute payments from a growing number of people. That was simply an acknowledgement from those people that they submitted to China and recognized that China was superior and stronger than them. And so as far as making contact with some of these places, they were able to bring back some interesting things that were not necessarily found in China. And that was a part of what Yonglo was interested in, is just what's out there, looking for interesting things that might be found. Now, one of the things on this slide that is important to take a look at, in addition to just kind of reiterating some of the things that I was just saying about what the Voyages accomplished, is to look at this picture. And again, this might be a little bit difficult to see because it is one of the examples of a large Chinese ship, and then in front of it is an example of the European ships that would soon be built. And one of the things to note is just the scale. Some of these Chinese ships were just simply gigantic, with the largest being longer than a football field. I mean, so basically imagine being at a football stadium, and one of these Chinese ships from the early 1400s would be bigger than the football field itself. So this was really pretty impressive. I'm sure it was a bit intimidating when they arrived on the shores of the various people that they came into contact with. So depending on who you talked to at this time, some people probably saw this as just fantastic, really successful voyages, and just a great thing. But not everybody saw it that way. Even though this might have been something that Yonglo was interested in, other top Chinese officials, when they had the opportunity to put an end to these voyages, did. These were not cheap. These were very expensive for China to engage in. And there were quite a few people at the top that just basically felt like it wasn't worth it. So after the seventh voyage, by 1433, these voyages of exploration and these voyages at sea stopped. And China would go back into a state of isolation, which again was really the norm for China. This was just really a strange stretch of time where for nearly 30 years, China was active in their region, making contact with other people. In the next set of videos, we'll take a look at other examples of exploration, most specifically taking a look at what got Europe interested in sailing and exploring. So thanks for joining me. Hope you'll join me for the next video.